This is the Volvo EX90, and you could call it the electric version of the company's XC90, but no, that will be doing it a massive disservice. This is a lot more than that. It might just be the best Volvo ever. Volvo says it's the most powerful, most sophisticated, most technologically advanced car they've ever built, offering style, space for 7 passengers, and next-generation safety features. That's big talk from the Swedish company, and that's why I've flown all the way to California to find out whether it's true for myself. I'm going to test the car's practicality, performance, and technology, and I'm doing it with the help of a friend. This here, his name's Lewis. He's a goat. I couldn't find a dog in time, but he's going to help us test one of the EX90's coolest new features. Apparently, it can help you avoid locking your pets accidentally in your car. Off you go. Apparently, the car has an internal radar sensor that can scan the vehicle for occupants if you're absent-minded enough to leave anyone or anything living left inside. It theoretically works on pets as well as humans, scans the cabin as well as the boot, but how effective is it really? Right, let's see if the door shuts. I'll use the key card and I'll actually put it on the door handle. Yep, and as you can see, it's actually refusing to shut. And there's a message on the screen that says presence detected inside the car. That is a really useful feature, especially on a hot day like this, and particularly if you love your animals like me. So it's clever. It's also big, around 4 inches longer than the XC90, although 1 inch less tall and a couple of inches less wide. It has cool motorized lights at the front, which wink at you and do a little animation when you approach the car, plus animated rear lights. The sides are notable for their absence of any rubber cladding around the wheel arches, hinting that this has a more luxury focus than the slightly more rugged-looking XC90, with those arches housing big, distinctive-looking 22-inch alloys. First impressions are actually pretty good. It's a handsome car, but there are things that I'm personally not sure about. For example, the door handles are a bit fiddly if you ask me. It's open right now, but because they're flush, you've got to dig your fingernails in there before they pop open, and that's not ideal. Also, look at the state of this, right? The housing for the door mirrors is super chunky. It's got 2 separate cameras, one for looking down the side of the car and another for looking backwards, but it's just so big and bulbous. Speaking of bulbous, have a look at that, the LiDAR sensor. Absolutely massive. It reminds me of something. Oh yeah, that's it. That LiDAR and those extra cameras in the door mirrors are designed to give the car self-driving abilities, although for the moment, full autonomous driving isn't available. It should come at some point in the future, but it's slightly annoying that customers are having to pay for these sensors when currently they don't actually do very much. More important than the sensors is, of course, what's in the boot. With all 7 seats in place, you get a fairly healthy 310 litres up to the window line, slightly less than a BMW X7. And what's fantastic and slightly unexpected is the amount of underfloor storage you get, making this a genuinely spacious car, even when fully loaded with passengers. Third row dropped, you get 665 litres, again, less than an X7's 750. There's something else I want to show you about this boot. Let's just say like you got pets or something, I don't know, a goat or a small dog, and you want to put it in the boot, but it's not quite as agile as it used to be. There's something the EX90 can actually do to help you both out. Come here. What it can do, if you press this button, is to actually lower the rear suspension. Look at that. And now, much easier for our furry friend to get inside. I'll tell you what, I'm bumping my head now, that's how low it is. Another thing it can do is if you press these buttons, oh my God, it's eating me. Right, I think that was the foot-activated closing mechanism there. Anyway, you can press another button to close these third row of seats to make it much more spacious in the back if you don't want to carry 7 people. The downside is that the second row of seats isn't electrically operated. To open those, you've actually got to run around to both sides and open them manually. But if you do that, it does extend the storage up to around 1900 litres. So yeah, genuinely spacious, the EX90. Volvo calls it a full-size 7-seater and claims that even the third row is big enough to accommodate fully grown gentlemen like myself. It's a proper 7-seater. We're what? 5'11", lads?
Yeah.
5'10" and a half?
Yeah, I'd say 5'11" and a half.
Something like that. And I've got loads of leg room, loads of headroom, and we've also got our own USB ports. What's it like up front?
Ooh, I like your aftershave.
Paco Rabanne. Anyway, yeah, no, do you know what? It's actually all right up here. I've still got loads of leg room, loads of headroom, and we got a couple of USB ports. I got rear seat climate controls. These little nets are a bit flimsy back here, but actually feels pretty good, wouldn't you say? Yeah, these seats move forward, they move backwards, and actually all 3 seats move forward and backwards to give people more room in the back as well. You lot are right back there. The one thing I don't like is that this big sunroof looks great, but there's no shade, so it lets in a lot of heat. As for the front of the cabin, it's very nice, spacious, comfortable, and everything is thoughtfully laid out with Swedish minimalism very much in full effect. I love the fact that it's got a lot of different material types in this car. You got this fake leather stuff, you got this almost cloth feeling material below that, the glossy black, and then this almost birch looking material just above some chrome, and it all hangs together really, really nicely. It feels and looks premium. And Volvo are leaning into this whole sustainability thing to the point where the interior of this car contains, get this, nearly 50 kilograms worth of recycled or bio-based materials. And normally sustainably sourced materials tend to look a bit naff, but that's not really the case in this car. Until you go looking for problems, and there are some problems. For example, on this center console, again, we've got this birch material, which does look good from a distance, but then you start to poke around and then you realize it's actually not really very solid. It actually looks like a really thin, almost like a sticker placed on top of cheap feeling plastic. It might be recycled plastic, I hope it is. But yeah, if you go sniffing around, you start to see where things don't really look quite as premium as they might seem from a distance. Still, the technology is really good in this car. You got this 9-inch driver display. It's a little bit on the small side, but it's high res and it looks great. You've got a head-up display, which for the most part works very well, even though it's a bit dim. And then you've got this big 14-inch central screen, which runs on Android, and it is really, really responsive. I do wish there were more physical buttons in this car, but on the whole, it works well. And the fact that it runs on Unreal Engine means it is buttery smooth. Yeah, on the whole, great cabin. We're about to set off, but before I do that, there is one thing that annoys me greatly about this car, and that is the steering. Okay, so when it's switched off, we've got no power steering, obviously, and it's really stiff. But when you put the car into drive, you expect it to fire up really quickly and give you power steering immediately, but it doesn't do that. Watch this. Put it into gear, it's stiff, 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 and then 3 seconds later, it gets loose. If you're in a hurry, this will just annoy you every single time you get in the car. Right, onwards. So, what is the Volvo EX90? Well, obviously it's a luxury EV, and it's a very important car for the company because it represents another huge step towards full electrification, where by the year 2030, the only type of car Volvo will make are cars powered by batteries. Speaking of which, this one has a big one, 111 kilowatt hours, of which 104 kilowatt hours is usable. We're going to get 2 versions of this car from launch, a twin motor Ultra and a twin motor Performance Ultra. They're both going to use exactly the same battery pack, but they'll offer different performance and cost different amounts of money. The entry-level car will set you back £96,500, while this top-level twin motor Performance Ultra will cost just over 100 grand. Is it worth all that money? I don't know, it's quite punchy, innit? But first impressions are really good. I love these seats. They feel really soft and plush. They're actually really wide, but still supportive. Lovely place to sit. Suspension's good too. It's got adaptive air suspension, and in the softest mode, it's very, very soft. Arguably a little too soft maybe. I'd like a bit more body control, but you can firm it up, and we'll try firming it up in a little while. I have to say the steering's very, very light, and the braking is really good in this car as well. There's a few different braking modes you can choose from, actually. There's a normal mode where the car kind of responds like a standard car, or there's an automatic mode where it brakes if it senses a vehicle in front of it, or you can go for the full one-pedal driving experience, and all of them are really nice to use. It's really intuitive, and the brakes are very easy to modulate. I think the main thing I'm getting from this car is that it's a lovely place to sit. It's got a really nice look and feel to it, and also a really nice sound. Volvo say this is the quietest Volvo ever, and I believe them. In my entirely unscientific testing, the EX90's cabin measured around 59 decibels at 70 miles an hour. For what it's worth, that's about the volume of a normal conversation, so it's about as loud as you are. One of the best things about having a really quiet cabin is when you pair that with a really good stereo system, and the EX90 has one of the best on the market. It's got a 25 speaker, 1610 watt Bowers & Wilkins audiophile grade stereo system, which sounds tremendous. There's speakers everywhere in this car, including in the headrest. And it supports Dolby Atmos, which means whoever's recording the audio can play specific sounds in 3D space, and when you play it back, you can hear those noises in different places in the car. It really is something. There are a couple of things that I don't like about the EX90 though, and a few of them are actually really avoidable, but Volvo, you've scored a couple of own goals, let me tell you. One of those own goals is the window switches in this car. Now, if you're a parent, you know all about this. You're driving along, you've got two kids in the back, and they wind the window down, right? It's easily solved. Normally, you just push the window button to wind it back up. But in this car, there are only two window switches in the front, and by default, they control the two front windows. If you want to control the rear windows, you've got to press a whole separate button to switch the buttons from controlling the front to controlling the rear, and that is just more hassle than it needed to be. The other thing, and this is also related to buttons, is that there aren't really any physical buttons and switches inside this car. You've got a volume knob, great, thank you very much. But apart from that, everything's in the screen, which makes it super difficult to get used to. Luckily, they've put all the usual controls that you might need quick access to along the bottom, so things like your climate control and your heated seats, for example. But finding common features that are really easily accessible on a normal car sometimes requires you to go digging around in a menu, and it just makes it more difficult and perhaps more dangerous than it needs to be. Let's say, for example, I'm driving along, it's quite foggy, and I realize I need to have my rear fog lights on. What you got to do is watch the road, watch the screen, press the car icon. I'm going around a bend, so it's a bit tricky. Watch the road, watch the screen, find the lights icon, press that, watch the road, watch the screen. There's a car coming, I'll wait for that, go around the corner, watch the screen again, find the rear fog light icon, press that, and then the lights are on, but then you've had an accident because it's foggy and you spent half your time looking at a bloody display. Give us physical buttons, please. Another potential downside is efficiency, especially if you drive it enthusiastically. Driven sensibly, Volvo say that both initial versions will deliver 374 miles on a single charge, which would require an average of 3.4 miles per kilowatt hour. I managed somewhere between 1.5 and 2 miles per kilowatt hour, and that's enough for between 160 and around 220 miles of range. One way of driving sensibly is to use the EX90's driving assistance features. It will automatically stay in its lane while it keeps a set speed, adjusting to that speed if it encounters other traffic in front of you. And on the whole, it works well, even changing lane automatically when you indicate, as long as you have your hands on the steering wheel. One of the coolest things, potentially, is that big bulbous LiDAR box on the roof. Apparently, it's going to be able to scan the road ahead, even for small objects and even at motorway speeds, to alert you that you might be about to collide with an object. Now, obviously, we've still got our mate Lewis, the dog, goat, whatever. So I feel like it's in our best interests to see whether that LiDAR thing actually works. Don't worry, it's not littering. It's science. Good luck, mate. Oh. Awkward. Right, now to turn around. In fact, I'm going to do a quick 3-point turn, see what the turning circle's like in this car. It doesn't have rear wheel steering, so it's not the tightest turning car in the world, but that's not bad, and it goes quickly between reverse and forward. Anyway, here we go. Will the LiDAR do its job? No, it didn't. No, it didn't. RIP. Ah well, the idea is that in future, the car will warn you if you're about to run over things, giving you time to take action. Modern Volvos already have this feature for larger objects, but the addition of a small object sensor is an interesting idea, although paying for a device that doesn't actually work yet does sting a bit. Anyway, is the EX90 fun to drive? As I said earlier, there are two versions of this car initially, a twin motor Ultra and a twin motor Performance Ultra, and they're both very powerful. The basic car makes 408 horsepower and 770 Newton meters of torque. The more powerful car, that's the one I'm in today, makes 517 horsepower with 910 Newton meters of torque, and it really does shift. It will do 0 to 62 in 4.9 seconds, which is very rapid, but what's most impressive is that the acceleration is quite progressive. It doesn't just send you down the road violently as you get in some electric cars. You put your foot down and it kind of builds progressively in a linear fashion that feels really nice and natural. Sure, there are faster cars out there, but in a lot of EVs, you don't tend to use the performance on offer just because it feels like just too much. In this, it feels really well judged. Top speed, pretty irrelevant in a car like this, but I'll tell you anyway. It's 112 miles per hour, electronically limited by Volvo. They want to bring down top speeds in order to reduce the likelihood of fatal accidents occurring when you get into a bit of a prank. It's still rapid though, from 0 to 112. This thing absolutely shifts. Let's talk about handling. As you might have noticed, I have taken it to some really twisty roads. These are some of my favorite roads on the planet, actually. These are the type of roads that would really expose a car if the handling wasn't sorted. So this is gonna give us a lot of information. And what I'm getting is that it's surprisingly capable. It's got a motor at the front and a motor at the rear, but you might be surprised to hear that in most cases, the EX90 is predominantly front-wheel drive. The only time the rear motor tends to kick in is when you're pulling away from a standstill to give you extra traction, or when you're driving at relatively high speeds in a straight line to give you extra stability. Now, that is not ideal on roads like this, but Volvo have a solution. They have this performance all-wheel drive button, and when you hit that, it wakes up the rear motor permanently to give you extra performance when you need it. And it definitely works. The thing that surprises me is that dynamically, this is a really capable car. What felt wallowy around town when you had the suspension in its softest mode is completely transformed when you put the suspension in firm. And you marry that up with the fact that it's got the batteries mounted low down to give you a low center of gravity, and it really does feel nice in these bends. In a lot of these big, heavy, and yes, electric SUVs, you can feel a bit queasy when you're driving quickly, especially through twisty roads, and that is caused in some degree by having active anti-roll stabilization, which this car doesn't actually have. But what that means is that even though you have a little bit of movement in the body, all those movements feel really organic, and your mind and your body expect those movements, and they feel so natural. This is good. I've also changed the steering from soft into firm, and I've got a surprising amount of feel and feedback from it. This is a really capable, grippy, dynamically involving car, and it's got 7 seats. Okay, there's a bit of understeer, but you'd expect that. The thing weighs 2.8 tons, but I'm actually having fun. Maybe there is hope for the BMW M5 after all. This is really rather good. How do we sum it up properly? Well, it's impressed me in pretty much every aspect, this car. It's got all the space you need for 7, lots of luggage space, loads of tech, one of the best infotainment systems on the market, and it's plush when you're just pottering around town, which is what you want from a £100,000 SUV. The thing that's maybe surprised me the most though is how much fun it is to drive. The EX90 it's a bit of a sleeper. This thing's a laugh. Okay, I kind of wish it didn't look quite as much like a London taxi thanks to that lump on the roof, but beggars can't be choosers. On the whole though, this is a brilliant car. Well done, Volvo.